Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with another Total War Warhammer video. Recently we spoke about all the possible demon units for the Demons of Chaos in Total War Warhammer 3, but the topic of mortal servants has also popped up every now and then. Many of us are hoping for true monogod factions, both mortal and demon, but the only way we're going to be able to do that with certain gods is by implementing units from Age of Sigmar too. As the Warriors of Chaos were always designed, in Warhammer Fantasy at least, to be an undivided roster, so there were not many god-specific units. It's a shame that much of this didn't get expanded upon on the tabletop, but with recent developments in Age of Sigmar, and also the announcement of Warhammer the Old World, true monogod factions are indeed possible now. So today we'll begin a small new series on the channel dedicated to all the possible monogod units for each respective god. We'll start off with Slaanesh, as Slaanesh has recently received a bunch of new units in Age of Sigmar, which in all honesty would likely serve Slaanesh's forces very well and make more of a distinction between all of the Chaos gods. Slaanesh's forces are based around speed, fast damage and ostentatious gear. While it is indeed possible just to have their armies reskinned from a black armor to more purple or pink, it wouldn't really serve Slaanesh's aesthetic in any way, shape or form. Unfortunately, during the days of Warhammer Fantasy Tabletop, Slaanesh only had one mortal servant type, and those were the Hellstriders of Slaanesh, marauders from Norsca and other places of Chaos Taint, but instead of riding horses they would ride atop of steeds of Slaanesh. These were fast units with poison attacks. They weren't really great at melee combat, but they were extremely fast and served as a skirmishing shock cavalry. They didn't really serve as marauder horsemen, as obviously without the range they were used in a far more different sense. However, the fact that the steed of Slaanesh itself had poison attacks and armor piercing, they were fairly common on the tabletop. Now, of course, these were not the only variant. Other than those with spears, you could also have a different Hellstrider of Slaanesh. These were the Hellstriders of Slaanesh once again, but with Hellscourge weapons instead of spears. Unfortunately fairly uncommon on the tabletop, but they did serve their purpose. It's assumed that in Total War, the Hellscourges themselves would do extra armor-piercing damage. Paired with the fact that the steed of Slaanesh itself is incredibly fast, it could serve as a great shock cavalry to do great damage against heavily armored units, say for example Bretonnian Knights, Imperial Greatswords and the like. They had much more armor on this model too, but I don't believe that was represented as such on the tabletop, which is a shame, but it can be assumed that they would be a more medium but still fast cavalry type of unit. Unfortunately, as I said before, that's pretty much all that Slaanesh had in terms of mortal units for Warhammer Fantasy battles. Slaanesh didn't even receive any new units in the end times. However, recently, Slaanesh has received a bunch of new units in Age of Sigmar, very similar in aesthetic to those already seen in concept art and models released before. And given their art style with their new release, it's very much expected that they would work incredibly well with that of Total War Warhammer's monogod factions. And many people already expect them to be released in Warhammer the Old World as backward compatible miniatures. So let's take the time now to look over these new mortals and see how they could be implemented in Total War Warhammer. First, we'll look towards the Blissbarb Archers, a very interesting unit purely because it has been a very long time since the Forces of Chaos have seen a true archer unit. It would seem that Games Workshop are now trying to differentiate the forces of all the Chaos gods, where at the time of recording this video, Slaanesh is the only one to receive archers, and this might work rather well, a replacement for the basic Marauder units with its own unique Slaaneshi style. I'm assuming if implemented into the game, this would be low tier chaff, fast moving skirmishing range archers but it would be quite needed, and it's very possible that we'd see two possible variants. The basic Bliss Barb archers, and then one with poison attacks, as it does fit with the theme of Slaanesh. One thing to note here is that these archers also carry around blades. You can expect that with most archers anyway, but the reason I'm pointing this out is cause it could be possible that we could see a Bliss Barb melee variant. That way we have both range and melee troop choices, and we won't have to focus around with the basic Marauders. Bear in mind here that the Marauders serve their purpose, but they're not considered to be pretty in the Slaaneshi sense. So I believe that the units themselves would act as a fine replacement. Next we have the Bliss Barb Seekers. We spoke already about the Hellstriders of Slaanesh, and we already expect them in Total War Warhammer 3, but the thing is that both of them are melee variants. The issue here is that you want fast cav with at least some range, especially for Slaanesh, who focuses around fast attack. So with the two Hellstriders already in place, why not also add the Bliss Barb Seekers as a fast moving range unit which you can use to kite around your foes. It's important to also note that these Seekers specifically are known as Exalted Steeds of Slaanesh, not regular Seekers. They've also got their own unique art style and do have a bit of armor upon them. It can be assumed that these Seekers in Total War would be a bit faster than the original and would also benefit from increased armor values. So in that regard, the Bliss Barb Seekers themselves would be considered a higher tier unit than the standard Hellsteeds. Another unit would be that of the Slickblade Seekers, once again a melee variant on Exalted Seekers of Slaanesh. These are considered to be hard-hitting light cavalry, and I'm assuming would work in a very similar sense as to those of the Hellstriders. The only thing is they would be more powerful and thus would be a higher tier. You might be noticing a lot of similarities here, but think of this in the same way as how Bretonnia is introduced in Total War Warhammer, where the Hellstriders would be considered very much in the same way as to the Knights Errant, and the Slickblade Seekers would be considered very similar to that of the Knights of the Realm, or Questing Knights, as the weapon itself looks more like a great weapon rather than a basic spear. Slangor Fiendbloods are the first time we've seen a Slangor introduced into the Warhammer setting in a very long time. Now upgraded to be more of a monstrous unit, it could be expected that the Fiendbloods would replace the basic Chaos Spawn, having a very similar role on the battlefield, but instead being much faster and more agile in combat. The introduction of these new beastmen could serve as a further reinforcement to the frontline assault, as the majority of Slaanesh's armies are focused around flanking and fast maneuvering. You'll need some big beastie to help your frontline troops. Speaking of frontline troops, we have the Myrmidesh Painbringers, very much a sword and board elite unit, very similar to that of the Chaos Chosen. I'm assuming that they would replace the basic Chosen rather than the basic Chaos Warriors, as they are quite heavily armoured in very ostentatious gear. This is a basic sword and board unit, as I said, so it doesn't really need that much explaining, but would look quite nice on the battlefield, especially in a pure Slaaneshi force. And lastly, in terms of units, we have the Symbaresh Twin Souls. Now these are rather interesting, as you can see, as all of them shown on screen wield different weapons. In Age of Sigmar, it is completely possible to have squads of different units there wielding different weapons. However, in Warhammer Fantasy and that in Total War Warhammer, it's not so much common. It could even be that some of these units could be divided into their own respective subunits. You see one with great weapons, one dual wielding, another there with just a singular weapon. It really depends. But with this there could be 3 different variants, which serves its own purpose and fills out the roster rather nicely. Heavily armoured units very similar to that of the Painbringers themselves. I'm assuming by the loadout, the style of armor, and so on, both the Twin Souls and the Painbringers would be considered basic frontline units, either replacing Chaos Warriors as stated before, or chosen units. With all the units already discussed, the roster itself has been filled out rather nicely. Now you have a true Slaaneshi force, which is why I think that they would fit very well in Total War Warhammer. The aesthetic remains the same to everything already Slaaneshi in terms of artwork and so on, as I've stated before, so it's not like there are drastic changes. And let's be honest, this look is much better than that of just Chaos Warriors in pink or purple. Reskins, and more reskins are just incredibly boring, and if we're going to get 5 Chaos factions in total, that of course being Chaos Undivided, Chaos Slaanesh, Chaos Nurgle, Chaos Tzeentch, and Chaos Khorne, it would just be extremely boring to have the same units just with a different armor color. This is something I myself have always wanted in Warhammer Fantasy, distinction between the gods. Chaos Undivided can remain the same, but if they're devoted to one specific deity, they should really look the part. The Fiendbloods themselves would also greatly benefit the Beastmen, as that would be a possible new unit for them, similar to how we also have Beastmen of Tzeentch, and recently Games Workshop have been hinting at possible new Beastmen of Nurgle and Beastmen of Khorne. We're still not done with this video, as you see during this release new characters were also added in for Slaanesh. First we have the Lord of Pain, a Slaaneshi frontline character with a massive great weapon. Chaos in general is in need of new types of character choices, especially for god-specific rosters, so this works incredibly well. It would work very much in the same way as that of a Chaos Lord, but buff up the Slaaneshi specific units. Next we have the Shard Speaker of Slaanesh. So this is a new type of spellcaster for the Slaaneshi forces. Very much more fitting than a heavily clad armored warrior. As it is a spellcaster of Slaanesh, it can be expected to either have the Lore of Slaanesh or the Lore of Shadows. There's really not too much to talk about these two characters, as they're easy enough to explain. They would have the same role as that of what we already have, just with a new feel and a new look. However, once again, before we end this video, there was one specific character, that of a named character that was added in, that still could potentially work. Glutos, Lord of Gluttony, which is a specific character to Age of Sigmar, however, I could see this being implemented in a different way. Now, it's very much possible that he could have existed back in Warhammer Fantasy, new lores being written especially for Old World. However, we already have a bunch of Warhammer Fantasy specific characters that have not been added in as of yet. Currently, we only have Prince Sigvald as a Slaaneshi devoted character, so instead I would see this being implemented as that of a Slaaneshi Chaos War Shrine. We already know well enough what War Shrines do, especially if you've used the Mammoth on the Norsca roster, which has a War Shrine. But as of yet, we've still yet to receive the Chaos one, and the Chaos one is very much specific to Chaos Undivided. So the Lord of Gluttony itself could be changed to a Slaaneshi War Shrine. I think aesthetically it looks rather well, and it does indeed have a similar look and feel to that of the Undivided one. This would be a monstrous buffing unit. It's able to be in the front line without a problem, but its main reason is to be there to buff up your forces with a variety of different buffs. With that, we've pretty much spoken about every possible Slaaneshi unit. I'm not an Age of Sigmar player, but even I can admit that the theme of this unit is very much Slaanesh, and it would fit extremely well for a mono-god faction for Slaanesh in Total War Warhammer. I'd much rather this than basic reskins, because if we see reskins for one, we're gonna see reskins for all of them, and if we look towards Age of Sigmar with the Chaos units in mind, and even the End Times, the rosters for the Chaos Warriors can be filled out quite dramatically. God-specific mortal forces would be very possible with their units, and it would work extremely well in my opinion. But what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Birch, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.